I smoothed down my silk dress as the maitre d' led us to our private dining room at Le Cirque. Michael had insisted on celebrating our 15th anniversary at the most exclusive restaurant in the city, though he'd been oddly specific about the seating arrangement and timing. "Everything needs to be perfect tonight," he'd said that morning, barely looking up from his phone. Now I understood why, as I watched his executive assistant Sarah saunter through the restaurant's entrance, wearing a dress that cost more than most junior executives' monthly salary. My husband didn't notice me pause in the doorway. He was too busy pulling out a chair for Sarah, his hand lingering on her shoulder a moment too long. The candlelight caught the diamond bracelet on her wrist, identical to the one that had mysteriously disappeared from my jewelry box last month. "Elizabeth." Michael finally noticed me, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Sarah had some urgent documents for me to review before tomorrow's board meeting. I hope you don't mind her joining us briefly." I took my seat, accepting the wine list with steady hands. Of course not. Though I'm surprised about urgent business on a Saturday night. Sarah's lipstick-perfect smile wavered slightly. "I know it's terribly inconvenient, but with the merger announcement on Monday—" "The Morrison merger?" I interrupted, taking a slow sip of water. "How interesting." Michael's head snapped up. "You know about Morrison?" "I do read the financial papers, dear." I didn't mention the other papers I'd been reading, specifically the ownership documents my lawyers had finalized yesterday. "Well, it's all very preliminary," Michael began. But Sarah touched his arm in a gesture far too familiar for an executive assistant. "Actually," she said, "that's partly why I'm here. We should tell her, Michael." I watched my husband's face as he reached for Sarah's hand. 15 years of marriage had taught me every nuance of his expressions. This one was his victory face, the same look he wore when closing a particularly ruthless deal. "Elizabeth," he started, "Sarah and we've grown close over the past year. These things happen sometimes. People grow apart. And with the Morrison merger about to make me CEO, you thought it was the perfect time to trade up?" I finished for him, my voice perfectly calm. "Don't be crude," he frowned. "I've had papers drawn up. You'll be very comfortable. The penthouse on Fifth Avenue, a generous settlement." "How generous?" I asked, genuinely curious about what he thought he could offer. $20 million, he said magnanimously, plus your car and personal effects. More than fair considering the prenup. Sarah beamed, already playing the supportive new partner. "Michael wants to be more than fair. We both do." I smiled, reaching for my phone. "That's so thoughtful, but before we discuss numbers, shouldn't we wait for the other guests?" "Other guests?" Michael's smile slipped. Right on cue, the maitre d' appeared with 3 more people. My lawyer, Richard Morrison himself, and the head of the SEC's Fraud Investigation Unit. "Sorry we're late," Morrison said cheerfully. "Traffic was terrible. But I wouldn't miss this for the world. After all, it's not every day you get to watch a CEO realize his company's been bought out from under him." The color drained from Michael's face as I pulled out a folder of my own. "Happy anniversary, darling," I said softly. "Would you like to see who just became the majority shareholder of your company?" Michael stared at the documents I'd placed on the table, his hands shaking slightly as he flipped through the pages. Sarah leaned over his shoulder, her perfect composure cracking as she read the details of what I'd accomplished. "This is impossible," he whispered. "The Morrison shares weren't even on the market." "Actually," Richard Morrison interjected, helping himself to a bread roll, "they've been available for 6 months. Your wife approached me with quite an interesting proposition right after you started having your late-night strategy sessions with Ms. Sarah here." I smiled, remembering the night I'd first discovered their affair. Michael had left his laptop open, displaying emails that were definitely not about corporate strategy. But buried in their careless correspondence was something far more valuable: details about his planned hostile takeover of Morrison Industries. "You see, darling," I explained, pouring myself some wine, While you were busy planning your personal and professional future with Sarah, I was making some plans of my own. Did you really think I spent 15 years as a corporate lawyer's wife without learning how mergers work? The SEC investigator, Janet Thompson, pulled out her own folder. We're particularly interested in these offshore transactions, Mr. Crawford, the ones you've been using to quietly accumulate Morrison stock through shell companies. Michael's face went from pale to ashen. Those accounts are perfectly legal. They would be, I interrupted, if you'd disclose them properly. But you were so focused on keeping them hidden from me during our upcoming divorce that you got sloppy with the regulatory filings. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I should go. Sit down, Ms. Peters, Janet said, firmly. Your recent real estate purchases with corporate funds are also of interest to us. I watched as my husband's carefully constructed world crumbled around him. The Morrison merger was supposed to be his crowning achievement, the deal that would make him CEO and wealthy enough to discard his wife without feeling the financial pain of our prenup. How long? He demanded, looking at me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. How long have you been planning this? Remember that charity ball 6 months ago? I asked, savoring the memory. When you were too busy whispering with Sarah to notice me talking with Richard Morrison? That was the beginning. Though I should thank you, all those times you dismissed me as just a housewife in front of your business associates made them quite willing to meet with me privately. No one suspected I was piecing together controlling interest in your company. The maitre d' appeared with our appetizers, pretending not to notice the tension at the table. I took a bite of my foie gras. It was excellent. The board will never accept this, Michael declared, but his voice lacked conviction. They already have, Richard Morrison replied. Emergency board meeting concluded an hour ago. Voted unanimously to accept the merger under the new terms. Elizabeth made quite an impression with her plans for the company. Sarah finally found her voice. But the prenup becomes void in cases of corporate fraud, my lawyer finished smoothly, which the SEC is now investigating thanks to those helpful emails you two exchanged on company servers. Really, Michael, you taught me better than to discuss insider trading through traceable channels. Michael slumped in his chair, 15 years of arrogance deflating as he realized the completeness of his defeat. What do you want? I dabbed my lips with the napkin, taking my time before answering. Well, since you offered $20 million for my silence and cooperation, let me make a counter-proposal. You can keep the penthouse and your personal effects. The company, your position, and most of our joint assets will be mine. Oh, and Sarah's consulting contract with the firm is terminated, effective immediately. You can't do this to me, he whispered. Actually, I smiled, raising my wine glass. I just did. Consider it my anniversary gift to you both, a lesson in why you should never underestimate a woman who spent 15 years watching you work. The look of utter defeat on his face was more satisfying than the finest wine Le Cirque could offer. The morning after our eventful anniversary dinner, I arrived at the office early. Michael's name was already being removed from the CEO's door as I walked through the executive floor, my heels clicking against the marble tiles he'd insisted on installing last year. The board is waiting, his now my executive assistant informed me, and Michael's personal items have been packed up. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. These men had known me for years as Michael's quiet, supportive wife. Now they were seeing a different side of me, and their expressions ranged from shocked to speculative. Gentlemen, I began, taking my seat at the head of the table. I believe we have some changes to discuss. Mrs. Crawford, Gerald Matthews, the senior board member, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should address the unusual circumstances of this transition. Of course, I smiled, opening my laptop. And it's Ms. Shaw now. I'm reverting to my maiden name. Shall we start with the offshore accounts Michael was using to manipulate stock prices? For the next 2 hours, I laid out everything I'd discovered during my months of quiet investigation. The insider trading, the misappropriated funds, the web of shell companies Michael had created to hide his activities. Some board members grew increasingly uncomfortable as I spoke, likely those who had been complicit in his schemes. "This is a delicate situation," Matthews suggested. "Perhaps a more gradual transition." "Is unnecessary," I interrupted, sliding copies of my reform proposal across the table. "Unless anyone would like the SEC to look more closely at their own investment activities." My phone buzzed. A message. From Michael. "You have no idea how to run this company. The board will never accept you." I showed the message to Richard Morrison, who had joined us for the meeting. He chuckled. "Should we tell him about your Harvard MBA? The one you completed nights while he thought you were at charity functions?" "Let him figure it out himself," I replied. "He never did pay attention to what I was really doing." The board meeting concluded with unanimous approval of my initial proposals. As the members filed out, several lingered to pledge their support, rats deserting a sinking ship, but useful rats nonetheless. Sarah was waiting in the reception area, clutching a designer handbag that I noticed was a gift from Michael's corporate account. "Elizabeth, please," she began. "I never meant to get caught," I finished for her. "Don't worry about your severance package. Unlike Michael, I believe in doing things legally. HR will be in touch." "But Michael said we would run this company together," she protested. "He promised—" "Michael promised a lot of things," I interrupted. "To me, to you, to the shareholders. The difference is, I actually deliver on my promises." Back in my new office, I found Claire, my old law school friend who'd helped me plan this takeover, waiting with champagne. "The SEC just froze Michael's personal accounts," she reported gleefully. "Apparently he was trying to make some rather large transfers this morning." "Predictable?" I nodded. "He always did panic when deals went bad." "You know he'll fight back," she warned. "Let him try," I replied, looking out over the city skyline. My view now. "He taught me everything he knows about corporate warfare. But he never realized I was learning from his mistakes, not his successes." My phone buzzed again. Michael's lawyer requesting an urgent meeting to discuss terms. "They still think this is a negotiation," Claire observed. "No," I smiled, declining the call. "This is a hostile takeover, and unlike Michael, I know how to make them stick." The day ended with a final board resolution. Michael Crawford was officially removed from all company positions and barred from entering any corporate properties. His keycard access was revoked, his company account suspended, his parking space reassigned. "Quite a first day as CEO," Claire commented as we left the office. "Just the beginning," I replied. "Michael spent 15 years building this company through corruption and manipulation. I'm going to rebuild it through actual leadership. That's a revenge he'll never understand." A week into my role as CEO, the first signs of resistance emerged. Michael's old allies within the company began their counterattack, thinking they could pressure me into a more amenable leadership style. 3 division heads have submitted their resignations," Claire reported during our morning briefing, "all threatening to take their client relationships with them." I reviewed their resignation letters, noting the identical phrasing. "Let me guess, Michael drafted these himself?" "From his parents' guest room," Claire confirmed. "That's where he's been staying since the SEC froze his accounts." The morning's financial news showed our stock price fluctuating as the market digested the leadership change. Michael's network was spreading rumors about instability and inexperience, trying to force the board to reconsider his removal. "Ms. Shaw," my assistant interrupted. "Sarah's here with some of Mr. Crawford's personal items. She's demanding to see you." I found Sarah waiting in the reception area, surrounded by boxes that probably contained more evidence than personal effects. "Michael wants his files," she announced, trying to project her former authority. "I'm sure he does," I replied pleasantly. The SEC wants them too. Guess who has priority? You have no idea what you're doing, she hissed. Michael built this company. Through fraud, insider trading, and manipulation, I finished. Yes, I know exactly how he built it. That's why I'm rebuilding it. Back in my office, Claire brought more updates. The resigning executives had started calling clients, trying to convince them to follow them to new firms. Should we try to stop them? She asked. No need, I smiled, showing her my phone. I've spent the last week meeting with those clients personally, showing them our new transparency initiatives, our strengthened ethical guidelines, our plans for sustainable growth. And they're staying. Turns out, major investors appreciate knowing their money isn't being managed through shell companies and insider trades. My phone buzzed. Michael again. You're destroying everything I built. The clients will never trust you. I showed the message to Claire, who had been my friend since law school and my secret ally in planning this takeover. He still doesn't get it, does he? She mused. No, I replied. He thinks business is about power and control. He never understood it's about trust and value. The afternoon brought another challenge. One of Michael's closest allies on the board called an emergency meeting, claiming to have evidence of irregularities in my takeover. I walked into the boardroom to find him presenting documents with flourish. These prove the Morrison acquisition was improper. Actually, I interrupted, placing my own files on the table. These prove it was completely legal. Unlike the insider trading your offshore accounts have been conducting for the past 3 years. The color drained from his face as I detailed his connection to Michael's schemes. By the time I finished, his resignation letter was on my desk. That's 3 board members gone, Claire noted after he left. All Michael's old guard. Good, I replied. Now we can appoint directors who understand modern corporate governance. Sarah appeared again near day's end, this time looking less certain. Michael wants to meet, to discuss a compromise. The only thing we'll be discussing, I informed her, is his cooperation with the SEC investigation. The more he fights, the more evidence we'll find. After she left, Claire brought the latest market reports. Our stock had stabilized as investors realized the company's fundamentals were stronger without Michael's creative accounting. His network is crumbling, she observed. Everyone's rushing to distance themselves from his practices. Because they finally understand, I said, watching the sunset from my office. This isn't just a change in leadership. It's a change in how business itself works. My phone lit up with one final message from Michael. You can't change how the game is played. No, I typed back. I already have. You just haven't realized you're playing a completely different game now. Looking out at the city lights, I thought about how Michael had spent years teaching me his version of corporate power. He never imagined I'd use those lessons to create something better than he could ever understand. 2 weeks into my leadership, the true scope of Michael's deception emerged in ways that shocked even me. A routine audit uncovered a hidden server containing years of encrypted correspondence, Michael's digital black book of corporate secrets. Need to see this, Claire said, rushing into my office early Monday morning. The encryption wasn't just hiding financial fraud. He was collecting dirt on every major executive and board member. I studied the decoded emails displayed on her tablet. Michael hadn't just been running a corrupt company. He'd built an entire ecosystem of mutual blackmail and coercion. Look at these threats, Claire pointed to a particularly damning exchange. He used information about Matthew's insider trading to force him to approve the Morrison takeover plans. My phone buzzed. The SEC's lead investigator, your husband, didn't just break securities laws. He created a criminal enterprise. Sarah appeared at my office door, looking nothing like the confident seductress from our anniversary dinner. I need to talk to you about Michael's files. The ones you helped him collect? I asked mildly, watching her clutch her designer handbag. Probably the last one Michael would ever buy her. You don't understand, she stammered. He made me keep records of everything. Said it was insurance. Against what? Against everyone. She placed a USB drive on my desk with shaking hands, including me. That's why I kept my own copies. Later, reviewing the files with Claire, a pattern emerged. Michael had ensured his position not through business acumen, but through carefully cultivated fear. Every promotion, every major deal, Claire noted, backed by implicit threats of exposure. And now we expose it all, I decided, reaching for my phone to call an emergency board meeting. Everyone's careers will be destroyed, Claire warned. No, I corrected. Everyone gets one choice. They can resign quietly and cooperate with investigators, or face public exposure and prosecution. The boardroom filled quickly. These men who had once dismissed me as Michael's trophy wife now watched with barely concealed panic as I connected my laptop to the presentation screen. Gentlemen, I began, let's discuss how this company will operate under new management. One by one, I laid out their options. By evening, half the board had resigned. The other half had agreed to my terms: full disclosure of past misdeeds and complete compliance with the new ethical framework I was implementing. The stock will take a hit, Claire cautioned as we watched another executive being escorted out. It, I replied. We're not just changing leadership. We're changing the entire culture. My phone lit up with a message from Michael. You're destroying everything I built. No, I typed back. I'm exposing what you really built and replacing it with something honest. Looking out at the city skyline from my office, truly my office now, I thought about how Michael had spent years teaching me his version of power. He never imagined I would use those lessons to dismantle not just his position, but his entire philosophy of corporate leadership. The next phase would begin tomorrow. New board members, new executives, new policies. But tonight, I savored the eye. Knowledge that Michael's carefully constructed web of corruption was unraveling thread by thread. You know what he never understood? I said to Claire as we prepared to leave. Real power doesn't come from knowing people's secrets. It comes from creating something they want to be part of openly. The light on my phone blinked again. Another resignation letter, another piece of Michael's legacy crumbling, another step toward building something better. The morning headlines screamed about corporate upheaval, but they missed the real story. While the business world focused on Michael's spectacular fall, I was quietly rebuilding the company from its foundation. Another ethics complaint, Claire announced, dropping a thick folder on my desk. This time about the Jensen contract. Apparently, Michael promised them exclusive distribution rights in exchange for some personal considerations. Cancel it, I said without hesitation, and send them our new standard contract. If they want to do business with us, it'll be through proper channels. My phone buzzed with an urgent message from our largest shareholder. Emergency meeting requested. Concerns about recent changes. The meeting room was tense when I arrived. Thomas Blackwood, who controlled 15% of our stock, was red-faced and agitated. This crusade for transparency, he began. It's destroying shareholder value. The stock is down 12% since you took over. I pulled up our latest projections on the screen. Actually, Mr. Blackwood, let's discuss your real concern. Like the fact that your hedge fund has been benefiting from Michael's insider information for the past 5 years. His face went from red to white. That's a serious accusation? It's not an accusation, I interrupted, sliding copies of emails across the table. It's documented fact. Now, would you like to discuss the terms of your quiet divestment? Or should I forward these to the SEC, IT? Afternoon, Blackwood had agreed to sell his shares at a significant discount. I'd already arranged for a consortium of ethical investors to buy them. You're playing hardball just like Michael did, Claire observed after Blackwood left. No, I corrected. Michael used secrets to force people to act against their interests. I'm using truth to make them face their own corruption. The day brought more challenges. 3 major clients threatened to leave, worried about the disruption. I met with each personally, showing them our new compliance frameworks and growth projections. Your accounts will be more profitable under transparent management, I explained to one hesitant CEO, and significantly less likely to trigger regulatory investigations. My phone lit up with a message from Sarah. Michael wants me to warn you. He says you have no idea what other secrets he kept. I showed the text to Claire, who had been methodically uncovering Michael's hidden networks. Should we be worried? No, I smiled, because unlike Michael, we don't need secrets to maintain control. The afternoon board meeting introduced our new corporate structure: complete transparency in all dealings, ethical oversight at every level, employee profit sharing and whistleblower protections. This isn't just corporate governance, I explained to the shocked executives. This is about fundamentally changing how business works. One director raised his hand. And if we can't compete under these restrictions? Then we'll fail honestly, I replied. But I suspect we'll find that integrity is actually a competitive advantage. Later, reviewing candidate profiles for the new executive team, I came across an interesting resume. A young woman Michael had once fired for questioning his methods. Hire her, I told HR, and find more like her. We're not just changing policies. We're changing the type of people who implement them. My phone buzzed one last time for the day. Michael's lawyer. My client suggests a mutual non-disclosure agreement. Tell your client, I replied, that non-disclosure agreements are part of the old way of doing business. We're doing something new here. Looking out at the sunset reflecting off surrounding buildings, I thought about how Michael had always claimed that business required secrets and shadows to function. You know what really scares him? I asked Claire as we ended the day. Not that we're exposing his corruption, but that we're proving business can succeed without it. She nodded, gathering her things. He thought he was teaching you about power. Instead, I finished. He taught me what needed to change. 1 month into our company's transformation, the first real test of our new approach arrived. A major competitor, sensing what they thought was weakness, launched a hostile takeover attempt. Atlas Corp is making a play, Claire announced, bursting into my office early Monday. They're offering shareholders a 30% premium. The business media is calling it a mercy killing of our ethical experiment. I studied the offer documents carefully. The timing wasn't coincidental. Atlas's CEO was one of Michael's oldest friends, and their corporate structure mirrored his approach to business. Look at their financing, I pointed out to Claire. The same web of offshore entities Michael used to use. Want to bet they're just as hollow? My phone rang. Atlas's CEO, James Porter, with what he probably thought was a courtesy call. Elizabeth, let's handle this professionally. Your reforms are admirable, but unrealistic. Let us take over before you destroy what's left of the company. Interesting timing, James, I replied, just when our audit is about to reveal your joint ventures with Michael. There was a pause on the line. I'm not sure what you're implying. The Cayman Island accounts? The shell companies in Singapore? Michael kept excellent records, James, even of the deals he did for friends. The takeover attempt lasted exactly 3 more hours. Then Atlas Corp suddenly withdrew their offer, citing market conditions. They're running scared, Claire observed, showing me their plummeting stock price. Apparently, some anonymous source tipped regulators about irregularities in their books. I smiled, remembering all the times Michael and James had bragged about their clever financial engineering. Amazing how quickly corporate raiders retreat when faced with actual scrutiny. The afternoon brought another surprise. Sarah requested a meeting, arriving in my office looking nothing like the polished mistress who'd sat at my anniversary dinner. I've been thinking about what you're building here, she began hesitantly. It's so different from how Michael ran things. Are you asking for your job back? I interrupted. No, she replied. I'm offering to help expose the rest of his network. There are things even your auditors haven't found yet. I studied her carefully. Why now? Because you proved something. I never thought possible, she said softly, that a company can succeed without corruption. That power doesn't have to mean control. Later, reviewing Sarah's information with Claire, the full scope of Michael's influence became clear. He hadn't just corrupted our company. He'd been part of a whole network of executives who maintained power through mutual corruption. It's like a house of cards, Claire mused. Pull one piece. And the whole thing falls, I finished. Which is exactly what we're going to do. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Porter told me what you did. You're making powerful enemies. No, I typed back. I'm making honest competitors. Try to keep up with the new reality. The day ended with a different kind of meeting. Young executives from across the company had requested time to discuss their ideas for furthering our ethical initiatives. You know what the real transformation is? I asked Claire as we listened to their presentations. Not just changing how business is done, but inspiring others to imagine how it could be better. Looking out at their eager faces, I saw something Michael never could: the future of business, built on integrity rather than fear. Michael thought he was teaching me about corporate power, I told Claire later. Instead, he showed me everything that needed to change. And now we're not just changing it in one company, we're changing it everywhere. My phone lit up one last time. A message from our largest institutional investor. Your ethical approach has exceeded all projections. We're increasing our position. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding where your enemies failed. It's transforming their entire world into something they can't even recognize, 6 weeks after taking control, I faced my biggest challenge yet. Michael's old allies had regrouped, launching a coordinated attack on multiple fronts. They thought they could force me back into their way of doing business. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 3 major shareholders are calling for a vote of no confidence, Claire reported, spreading newspapers across my desk. And our biggest clients are getting pressure to pull their accounts. I studied the headlines carefully. The business press was full of anonymous sources questioning my leadership, all using suspiciously similar language. Michael's fingerprints are all over this, I noted. Same tactics he used to use for hostile takeovers. My phone buzzed, the board chairman requesting an emergency meeting. When I entered the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Half the directors looked nervous, the other half smug. Elizabeth, Richard Porter, one of Michael's oldest friends, began. In light of recent market pressures, perhaps we should reconsider some of your more aggressive reforms. I took my seat at the head of the table, opening my laptop. Interesting timing, Richard. Speaking of aggressive, shall we discuss your offshore accounts? His smug smile faltered. I'm not sure what you're implying. No. Implications, I interrupted, turning my screen to display a series of transactions. Just documented evidence of how you and Michael engineered the Thompson merger last year. The SEC found it fascinating. The room fell silent as I clicked through more slides, each revealing another piece of the corruption network I'd spent weeks mapping. Every person in this room has a choice, I announced. Support our new direction or face the consequences of your past decisions. And before you vote, remember, I have access to all of Michael's files now. You're blackmailing us? Someone asked incredulously. No, I smiled. I'm offering you the same thing Michael did, a choice. The difference is, I'm asking you to choose integrity over corruption. He never gave you that option. By evening, the vote of no confidence had evaporated. 2 directors resigned, 3 more pledged their support for my reforms, and our stock actually rose as the market responded to our stability. Michael's counterattack failed, Claire observed as we reviewed the day's events. Because he still thinks power comes from secrets, I replied. He never understood that real strength comes from transparency. My phone lit up with his number. For once, I answered. "You turned my own tactics against me," he said, his voice tight with anger. "No, Michael, I showed everyone a better way. That's what really scares you, isn't it? Not that I beat you at your own game, but that I changed the game entirely." After hanging up, I called an all-hands meeting. Every employee needed to understand what had just happened and why it mattered. "Today, we proved something important," I told the assembled staff. "Not just that ethical business can survive attacks, but that it's stronger than the old corruption ever was." Looking out at their faces, some relieved, some inspired, all changed by recent events, I realized we'd passed a crucial milestone. The company wasn't just under new management, it had fundamentally transformed. "You know what Michael never understood?" I asked Claire later. "Power doesn't have to corrupt. It can actually heal if you use it right." She nodded, gathering reports from the day's battles. "He taught you how to fight." "No," I corrected, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of possibility. "He taught me what to fight for." 2 months into my leadership, an unexpected ally emerged. Sarah's testimony to the SEC had exposed corruption far beyond our company, leading other firms to reach out about implementing similar reforms. "Meridian Corp wants to partner with us," Claire announced, bringing in their proposal. "They're facing their own internal crisis and want our help transforming their corporate culture." I reviewed their situation carefully. Meridian's CEO had been one of Michael's closest allies in the past, which made their request particularly interesting. "Get me a meeting with their board," I decided. "Let's see if they're serious about change." The meeting was set for that afternoon. Walking into Meridian's boardroom, I saw the same fear and resistance I'd faced in our own company weeks earlier. "Your ethics program is impressive," their CEO began, "but our shareholders are concerned about short-term impacts." "Like the impact of SEC investigations," I interrupted, placing a folder on the table. "Because Michael's files had quite a lot to say about your joint ventures." The color drained from his face. "That's not a threat," I finished. "It's an opportunity. You can fight the changing tide or you can lead it. Unlike Michael, I'm offering you a real choice." By day's end, we had a partnership agreement. Meridian would adopt our ethical framework, and we would help shield them from the fallout of their past activities. "You're building an alliance," Claire observed as we reviewed the terms. "No," I corrected. "I'm building a new standard. Every company that joins makes it harder for the others to resist." My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. "Turning my friends against me now?" "Not against you," I typed back. "Toward something better. Try to keep up." The afternoon brought more developments. 3 other companies requested meetings about similar partnerships. The revolution was spreading. "It's like watching dominoes fall," Claire said, scheduling the meetings. "More like watching a cure spread," I replied. "Michael's way of doing business was a disease. We're showing there's a better way to succeed." Sarah appeared in my office later, carrying more files. "There's something you should see about how deep the corruption network really goes." I studied the documents she'd brought. The web of mutual corruption was more extensive than even I had imagined, but now it was becoming a map for reformation. "You're not just changing one company," Sarah observed. "You're changing how business itself works." "That's what Michael never understood," I replied. "Real power isn't about maintaining control, it's about inspiring transformation." Looking out at the city skyline, I thought about how Michael had spent years teaching me his version of corporate warfare. He never imagined I'd use those lessons to wage peace instead. "You know what the real victory is?" I asked Claire as we ended the day. "Not beating Michael's system, but making it obsolete." She nodded, gathering her things. "He thought he was showing you how to control people. Instead, I smiled. He showed me what needed to change, and now we're changing it, everywhere." 3 months had passed since that fateful anniversary dinner when Michael's world began to crumble. Now, standing in my office reviewing the quarterly reports, I could hardly recognize the company he'd built, because it had become something entirely different. "The numbers are remarkable," Claire said, spreading charts across my desk. "Profits up 40% since implementing the new ethics framework. Turns out transparency is actually good for business." I studied the data with satisfaction. Every metric that mattered, employee satisfaction, client retention, market share, had improved under ethical management. "There's more," she continued. "The business schools want to do a case study. They're calling it the Ethics Revolution, how one woman transformed corporate culture." My phone buzzed with a message that made me pause. Michael requesting a meeting. After a moment's consideration, I agreed. He arrived looking older, humbler, but still carrying himself with that practiced corporate poise. "You've done the impossible," he admitted, taking in the changed atmosphere of his former office. "No," I corrected. "I did what was necessary. You just never imagined it was possible." "The other CEOs are following your lead," he continued. "Everything I built, everything I taught them, is becoming obsolete," I finished. "That's what really bothers you, isn't it? Not that I took your company, but that I proved your entire philosophy wrong." Later, reviewing acquisition proposals from companies eager to join our ethical network, Claire brought news about Sarah. She started a consulting firm, helping other companies transition to transparent management. "Michael's final legacy," I mused, teaching everyone that his way of doing business doesn't work anymore. The day ended with a board meeting unlike any the company had seen under Michael's leadership. Instead of schemes and secrets, we discussed innovation and integrity. Instead of power plays, we planned progress. "You've created something remarkable," one director observed. "Not just a successful company, but a new model for success." Looking out at the city lights, I thought about that anniversary dinner that seemed so long ago. Michael had planned to humiliate me. Instead, he'd forced me to become something stronger than he could ever understand. "You know what the real revenge is?" I asked Claire as we prepared to leave. "Not just succeeding where he failed, but making his kind of failure impossible for everyone else." My phone lit up one last time. Michael's final message. "You didn't just beat me. You made everything I knew about power irrelevant." "No," I typed back. "I showed what real power looks like. It's not about control, it's about transformation." The city stretched out before me, its lights representing countless opportunities for change. Michael had taught me about corporate power, but I had learned something far more valuable. How to transform it into something that could actually make the world better. "Ready for tomorrow?" Claire asked, gathering her things. I smiled, thinking of all the companies waiting to join our revolution. Ready to keep changing everything. 4 months after taking control, our company's transformation had sparked a movement that was reshaping the entire industry. But with greater influence came greater challenges. "We have a situation in Asia," Claire announced during our morning briefing. "The regional directors are pushing back against our transparency requirements. They say it's culturally incompatible with how business is done there." I studied the reports carefully. Our Asian division had been Michael's playground for some of his more creative accounting practices. Now those old habits were proving hard to break. Book my flight to Singapore, I decided. Some things need to be handled personally. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. "The Asian markets will never accept your methods. Some cultures require a different approach." "Still trying to justify corruption?" I typed back. "Watch and learn." The Singapore office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower. Walking through it now, I could see the remnants of Michael's influence. The same nervous glances, the same hushed conversations stopping when executives passed. I called a full staff meeting. "I understand there are concerns about our new policies," I began, watching faces in the crowd. Let me tell you a story about my anniversary dinner. For the next hour, I shared everything: the betrayal, the discovery, the transformation. But more importantly, I shared the results: higher profits, stronger client relationships, better employee satisfaction. Michael taught me that some markets require corruption to function, I concluded. I'm here to prove him wrong, again. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young local executive stood up. "The old ways aren't our culture," she said firmly. "They're just habits we were forced to accept. Maybe it's time for new habits." By week's end, we'd reorganized the entire regional operation. The old guard who insisted on traditional methods were replaced by a younger generation eager for change. "The Singapore transformation is trending on business news," Claire reported via video call. "Other Asian companies are reaching out about implementing similar reforms." I looked out at the Singapore skyline, remembering all the times Michael had claimed some markets were immune to ethics. He never understood that integrity isn't a Western concept, it's a human one. Back in New York, I found Sarah waiting in my office. "Michael's been calling his old contacts in Asia," she warned, "trying to undermine what you're building." "Let him," I replied. "Every failed attempt just proves we're right." The afternoon brought news from our Singapore team. 3 major regional clients had committed to adopting our ethical frameworks. The revolution was spreading across continents. "You know what Michael really taught me?" I mused to Claire later. "That corruption isn't cultural. It's just the easiest choice when no one shows there's a better way." Looking out at the New York skyline, I thought about how far we'd come from that anniversary dinner. Michael had tried to teach me about power in different cultures. Instead, he'd inspired me to show that integrity speaks every language. My phone lit up with another message from him. "Asia will be your downfall. Some things don't change." "No," I typed back. "Some things do change. That's what terrifies you." The day ended with a video conference connecting our offices worldwide. On screens around the globe, I saw faces of people eager to be part of something better than what Michael had built. "He thought he was teaching me about global business," I told Claire as we wrapped up. "Instead, he showed me what needed to change. Everywhere. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding where your enemies failed, it's succeeding in ways they never imagined possible." 5 months into our transformation, we faced a new kind of challenge. Our success had drawn attention from tech giants looking to disrupt traditional business models. They saw our ethical framework as a weakness to exploit. "Tech Future is launching a competing platform," Claire reported. "Their CEO claims they can automate corporate governance, eliminate the need for human oversight." I reviewed their proposal carefully. The technology was impressive, but I recognized the underlying philosophy. Michael's old approach dressed up in algorithmic clothing. "They're not eliminating corruption," I noted. "They're just digitizing it." My phone buzzed with a message from their CEO, Alex Chen. "Your ethical revolution is admirable but outdated. Let us show you the future." The demonstration was set for that afternoon. Alex swaggered into our boardroom, all Silicon Valley confidence and digital disruption. "Our AI can monitor every transaction, flag any irregularities," he explained, flicking through sleek presentations. "No need for human judgment or ethical committees." "Interesting," I interrupted. "And who programs the AI's definition of ethical?" He faltered slightly. "Our algorithms are written by humans," I finished. "Humans who can be corrupted, just like Michael's old networks. You're not eliminating the problem, you're automating it." Later, reviewing Tech Future's code with our tech team, we found exactly what I suspected: backdoors and overrides hidden in the complexity. "Michael's been consulting with them," Sarah revealed, bringing more intel. "Teaching them how to hide old corruption in new technology." I smiled, reaching for my phone. Time to show them what real innovation looked like. By evening, we'd announced our own initiative, an open-source ethics framework that combined technology with human wisdom, not to replace judgment, but to enhance it. You're giving away our competitive advantage, a board member protested. No, I corrected. We're making ethical business the only competitive advantage that matters. The impact was immediate. Companies worldwide began adopting and contributing to the framework. Even TechFuture's own developers were jumping ship to join what they called the real future of business. Michael never understood this, I told Claire as we watched our project go viral. Real power isn't about controlling systems, it's about inspiring people to build better ones. My phone lit up with his number. For once, he sounded uncertain. You're changing the rules again. No, Michael. I'm showing that the old rules never worked. They just looked like they did because no one had built anything better. Looking out at the city lights, I thought about how he'd tried to teach me that business was about control, controlling information, controlling people, controlling systems. You know what real innovation is? I asked Claire as we ended the day. Not finding new ways to hide old problems, but creating solutions no one thought possible. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just beating your enemies at their own game, it's creating a whole new way to play. 6 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, I stood at the podium of the Global Business Forum, preparing to deliver the keynote address. The audience was filled with faces that had once been part of Michael's network. Now they were here to learn about the future they'd once fought against. The old model of business was built on a lie, I began, watching their reactions. The lie that power comes from control, that success requires corruption, that ethics are a luxury we can't afford. In the front row, I spotted Sarah, now running her own consulting firm helping companies transition to ethical management. Beside her sat Claire, my rock through all of this, and several of our reformed executives. Today, I'm going to share a different story, I continued. It starts with an anniversary dinner where my husband brought his mistress, thinking he was about to destroy my life. The room fell silent as I detailed our transformation. Not just the what, but the why. How each step toward transparency had made us stronger. How integrity had proven more profitable than corruption. My phone buzzed quietly, Michael watching the live stream. You're telling our private business to the world? No, I typed back. I'm telling them how private business doesn't work anymore. The presentation shifted to our results. Profits up 60% since implementing full transparency. Employee satisfaction at record highs. Client retention near perfect. And most importantly, a wave of change spreading through the industry. But the real story isn't about numbers, I told them. It's about choice. Every person in this room has the same choice I faced that night, to use power for control or for transformation. Questions came from executives worldwide, not challenging our methods anymore, but asking how to implement them. The tide had turned. Harvard Business School just made us their main case study, Claire reported during a break. They're calling it the end of corporate corruption, the Shaw Revolution. I smiled, remembering how Michael had always bragged about being featured in business school curricula. Now his methods would be taught as a cautionary tale. The day ended with a series of partnership announcements, major companies worldwide committing to our ethical framework. The change was becoming irreversible. You've created something remarkable, Sarah said afterward. Not just a better company, but a better way of doing business. Looking out at the city lights, I thought about how Michael had tried to teach me that business success required compromise. Instead, he'd inspired me to prove that integrity was the only sustainable strategy. My phone lit up one last time, Michael's final attempt. You've turned our whole world upside down. No, I replied. I turned it right side up. You just never knew which way was up. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving your enemies wrong. It's proving there was always a better way to be right. 7 months into our transformation, a new threat emerged that tested everything we'd built. A consortium of old guard companies, led by Michael's closest allies, launched a coordinated attempt to discredit our ethical business model. They're calling it the Traditional Business Alliance, Claire reported, spreading financial papers across my desk. 5 major corporations claiming our transparency requirements are damaging market competitiveness. I studied their public statement carefully. The language was pure Michael, claims about practical business realities and necessary market dynamics that were really just code for defending corruption. Look at their stock performance, I noted, pulling up comparative charts. Every company in their alliance is underperforming compared to firms that adopted our model. My phone buzzed with a message from their spokesman, Robert Chen, another of Michael's old friends. Your ethics crusade has gone too far. Time to discuss a reasonable compromise. They still think this is a negotiation, I told Claire. Time to show them it's an evolution. I called an emergency press conference, but not to defend our position. Instead, I had something else in mind. Today, we're releasing complete transparency reports for every company in our network, I announced to the assembled media. Full financial data, executive compensation, contract terms, everything. Let the market decide which business model works better. The impact was immediate. Our stock soared as investors recognized the value of true transparency. The alliance companies faced awkward questions about why they couldn't provide similar disclosures. Michael's been advising them, Sarah revealed, bringing intel from her consulting work. He told them your ethics program would collapse under market pressure. I smiled, remembering how he'd always underestimated the power of integrity. Time to prove him wrong again. By afternoon, cracks in the alliance were showing. 2 companies withdrew, their boards having seen the market's reaction. A third faced a shareholder revolt demanding they adopt our standards. You've turned their attack into an opportunity, Claire observed as we watched their stock prices fall. Because they still don't understand, I replied. Real power isn't about fighting change. It's about leading it. My phone lit up with Chen's number again. What have you done? He demanded. Our shareholders are in revolt. No, I corrected. They're just finally seeing the truth. That's what really scares you, isn't it? Not that we're winning, but that we're proving transparency actually works better. The day ended with a flood of new companies requesting to join our network. The alliance's attack had backfired spectacularly, accelerating the very changes they'd tried to stop. Michael called, Sarah reported. He said you've destroyed everything he spent his career building. No, I smiled, looking out at the city skyline. I've just shown everyone what he should have been building instead. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just defeating your enemy's attacks, it's turning them into catalysts for even greater change. 8 months after taking control, we faced a moment that proved just how completely the business world had changed. One of Michael's oldest friends and allies, the CEO of Global Financial, came to my office not to fight our changes, but to beg for help implementing them. My board is demanding we adopt your ethical framework, James Morrison admitted, looking uncomfortable in the visitor's chair where I'd once sat, listening to Michael's condescension. Our stock is tanking because we're seen as part of the old guard. I studied him carefully, remembering all the times he and Michael had mocked my naive ideas about business ethics. Interesting how quickly naive becomes necessary, isn't it? Elizabeth, please. He leaned forward. I know I was part of Michael's network, but I want to change. The whole industry is changing. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael. Morrison's betraying me too? Everyone I trusted is surrendering to your crusade. Not surrendering, I typed back. Evolving. Try to keep up. The afternoon brought more evidence of our impact. The Business Roundtable announced new ethical standards for member companies, standards that looked remarkably like our framework. They're basically admitting your way works better, Claire noted, reviewing the announcement. Everything Michael fought against is becoming industry standard. I called a meeting with our leadership team to discuss Morrison's request. The room was filled with faces that had once been part of the old system, now champions of the new one. Should we help the companies that opposed us? Someone asked. We're not just changing companies, I replied. We're changing how business itself works. The more firms we transform, the harder it becomes to maintain the old corruption, Chhatwar brought more intelligence about Michael's diminishing influence. His consulting firm is hemorrhaging clients. Nobody wants advice about hiding transactions anymore. They want help being more transparent. Because he never understood the real power of business, I told her. It's not about controlling information. It's about creating value through trust. By evening, we'd drafted terms for helping global financial transform. Not just technical changes, but a complete cultural overhaul. You're not just beating the old system, Claire observed as we reviewed the agreement. You're making it obsolete. Looking out at the sunset painting the city in gold, I thought about how Michael had tried to teach me that business was a zero-sum game. Instead, he'd inspired me to create a system where everyone could win through integrity. My phone lit up with another message from him. You haven't just changed the rules, you've changed what winning means. Finally, I replied, you're starting to understand. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding where your enemies failed. It's transforming their definition of success itself. 9 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, I stood in my office reviewing how completely the business world had transformed. The Wall Street Journal's headline said it all. The Ethics Revolution, How One Woman's Revenge Changed Corporate. America. The numbers are remarkable, Claire reported, spreading quarterly reports across my desk. Companies using our ethical framework are outperforming traditional firms by an average of 40%. The market has spoken. Integrity isn't just right, it's profitable. My phone buzzed with a message that made me smile. Harvard Business School wanted me to give the commencement address. They were making our story required reading in their ethics curriculum. Michael saw that, Sarah mentioned, bringing in more news. He's been quiet since they announced it. Because everything he taught them is being dismantled, I replied, remembering how proud he'd been of his guest lectures on practical business methods. The afternoon brought another kind of victory. The SEC announced new transparency requirements for public companies, regulations that looked remarkably like our voluntary disclosures. You haven't just changed one company, Claire observed. You've changed how the entire system works. I called a company-wide meeting to share what we'd accomplished. Looking out at the assembled faces, some who'd been with us since the beginning, others who'd joined our revolution along the way, I felt a deep satisfaction. 9 months ago, a man brought his mistress to our anniversary dinner thinking, he was about to destroy me, I began. He didn't realize he was actually about to inspire something much bigger than either of us. The room was silent as I continued. He thought he was teaching me about power. Instead, he showed me everything that needed to change in business, and together, we've changed it. My phone lit up with an unexpected message, Michael requesting a meeting. After some consideration, I agreed. He looked older when he entered my office, humbled in a way I'd never seen before. You've done the impossible, he admitted, staring out at the city where he'd once been king. Not just beaten me, but made everything I believed in obsolete. No, Michael, I corrected. I just proved there was always a better way. You could never see it because you were too focused on control to understand real power. Later, reviewing applications from more companies wanting to join our ethical network, Claire brought news about Sarah's success. Her consulting firm had become the go-to expert for corporate transformation. Even your enemies are becoming part of your legacy, she noted. Not my legacy, I replied. This is bigger than revenge now. It's about showing everyone a better way to succeed. Looking out at the city lights, I thought about how Michael had tried to teach me that business required corruption to function. Instead, he'd inspired me to prove that integrity was the strongest market force of all. My phone buzzed one last time, the business roundtable announcing me as their new chairperson. The old guard's final surrender to the new reality. You know what Michael really taught me? I asked Claire as we ended the day. That the best revenge isn't just winning. It's transforming the game so completely that no one can play the old way again. Sometimes victory isn't about defeating your enemies. It's about building something so much better that their ways become unthinkable. 10 months into our transformation, we faced a new challenge that tested the global reach of our ethical revolution. Our Asian competitors claimed our transparency requirements were culturally incompatible with their business practices. Shanghai, Financial is leading the resistance, Claire reported. They're telling clients our ethical standards are Western impositions that don't work in Asian markets. I studied their public statements carefully. The argument was familiar. The same. One Michael used to use about certain markets needing different approaches. Book my flight to Shanghai, I decided. Let's show them ethics speaks every language. My phone buzzed. Michael couldn't resist commenting. Some cultures will never accept your naive approach. I taught you about international business. No, I typed back. You taught me excuses for corruption. Time to break that last myth. The Shanghai office of our biggest competitor occupied an entire skyscraper. Their CEO, David Chen, greeted me with careful politeness, clearly expecting another Western executive trying to impose foreign values. Your ethical standards are admirable, he began diplomatically, but perhaps not suitable for all markets. I opened my laptop, displaying our Asian division's results. Interesting theory. Let me show you why it's wrong. For the next hour, I walked him through the data. Our transparent operations weren't just matching traditional Asian business practices. They were outperforming them significantly. But relationships are paramount in our culture, he protested. Your Western transparency builds stronger relationships, I interrupted. Because trust beats manipulation every time. Let me tell you about an anniversary dinner that proved that. I shared our story, not just the corporate takeover, but the fundamental truth it revealed about power and trust. By the time I finished, Chen's resistance had transformed into curiosity. Your husband thought certain markets needed corruption to function, I concluded. He was wrong about America, and he's wrong about Asia, too. Chen leaned forward, his expression changed. How long would it take to implement your framework? By week's end, we'd signed a partnership agreement. Shanghai Financial would adopt our ethical standards, becoming a model for Asian market transformation. Michael's last argument just collapsed, Claire observed when I reported our success. The idea that some markets can't handle transparency. Because he never understood, I replied, watching the Shanghai sunset. Integrity isn't a Western concept. It's a human one. My phone lit up with messages from other Asian CEOs, all wanting to discuss similar transformations. The revolution had gone truly global. The evening brought news that rocked the financial world. Shanghai Financial's stock had soared on announcement of our partnership. The market had spoken. Ethics weren't just compatible with Asian business. They were the future of it. You know what Michael never grasped? I asked Claire during our evening briefing. Real power isn't about adapting to different cultures. It's about revealing the universal truth that trust works everywhere. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving your enemies wrong. It's proving they were wrong about everything they thought they understood. 11 months after taking control, I found myself addressing a packed auditorium at Harvard Business School. The next generation of business leaders had requested a special lecture about our ethical revolution. Your case study is now our most requested course, the dean informed me. Students are fascinated by how you turned corporate revenge into industry transformation. Standing at the podium, I saw hundreds of eager faces, young minds not yet corrupted by the old ways of doing business. This was where real change would take root. Let me tell you about an anniversary dinner, I began, watching their reactions. Where a man brought his mistress thinking he was about to destroy his wife's life. Instead, he inspired a revolution in business ethics. My phone buzzed. Michael had heard about the lecture. Turning students against everything I taught. Them? No, I replied. Teaching them what you never understood. The questions came rapid fire. Not about revenge or takeovers, but about implementing ethical frameworks, building transparent operations, creating sustainable success. But won't we be at a disadvantage against less ethical competitors? One student asked. I smiled, remembering Michael's same argument. Let me show you our performance data since implementing full transparency. The numbers told the story: higher profits, stronger client relationships, better talent retention. Ethics wasn't just right, it was competitively superior. Your husband. Thought power came from controlling information, another student noted, but you proved it comes from sharing it. Because he never understood the real source of business power, I replied. It's not about what you can hide, it's about what you can build through trust. During the break, a young woman approached my podium. I'm starting my own company, she said. Your story made me realize we don't have to choose between success and integrity. Looking at her determined face, I saw the future of business. Not just reformed, but fundamentally reimagined by a generation that would never accept the old corruption. Claire brought news from our office. More companies adopting our standards, more markets embracing transparency, more proof that ethical business was the only sustainable path. You're not just teaching them business, she observed. You're teaching them leadership. No, I corrected, watching students eagerly discuss ethical innovation. I'm teaching them what's possible when you reject the old lies about power. The day ended with a dinner hosted by the business school's Ethics Center, now being renamed in my honor. The irony wasn't lost on me. Michael used to brag about guest lecturing here, Claire mentioned. Now his methods are taught as examples of what not to do. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just changing the present, it's shaping how future generations will think about power, success, and the true purpose of business. 1 year to the day after that fateful anniversary dinner, I stood again in Le Cirque. The same private dining room, the same elegant settings, but everything else had changed. The Wall Street Journal just named you Business Person of the Year, Claire reported, handing me the special edition. They're calling it the ethics revolution that changed corporate America. I smiled, remembering how Michael used to chase these accolades through manipulation and corruption. Now, true integrity had achieved what his schemes never could. Speaking of Michael, Claire continued, his last attempt at consulting just failed. Nobody wants advice on traditional business methods anymore. My phone buzzed, Michael requesting one final meeting. After consideration, I agreed. Some circles needed proper closing. He arrived looking older, humbled, but still carrying that corporate polish he'd once used to intimidate everyone around him. You've won completely, he admitted, taking the seat where he'd once plotted my downfall. Not just the company, not just the industry, but the entire way business works. No, Michael, I corrected. Business won. I just showed everyone it works better without corruption. Throughout dinner, he tried to understand what had happened, how his perfect plan to discard his wife had instead triggered a transformation that made his entire philosophy obsolete. I taught you everything I knew about power, he said finally. That was your mistake, I replied. You taught me about power's weakness. I discovered its strength on my own. Back at the office, Claire brought the latest numbers. Companies using our ethical framework were outperforming traditional firms by margins that made resistance futile. The old guard is finally surrendering, she noted. Even your enemies are adopting your methods. Because they finally understand, I said, looking out at the city lights. Real power isn't about control, it's about creation. My phone lit up with, Congratulations from business leaders worldwide. The revolution wasn't just complete. It had become the new standard for success. Sarah visited later, bringing news about her ethics consulting firm. Companies are literally competing to prove they're more transparent than their rivals. Michael never imagined that possibility. I mused. That integrity would become a competitive advantage. The day ended where it had begun a year ago, but this time I was hosting a different kind of anniversary dinner. One celebrating not a marriage, but a transformation. Looking around at the gathered faces, Claire, Sarah, reformed executives and new allies, I realized we'd achieved something far beyond revenge. You know what Michael really taught me? I asked them. That sometimes the worst betrayal can inspire the greatest change. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning. It's transforming the entire game into something better than your enemies could ever imagine. 3 months into my role as commissioner, our investigation into James's consulting firm revealed a disturbing pattern. He wasn't just advising companies. He was creating a new network of corporate corruption disguised as ethics reform. "Look at these connections," Claire explained, spreading documents across my desk. Every company that hired his firm shows the same pattern of hidden transactions and offshore accounts. "He's teaching them our methods," Victoria added. "But twisted to hide misconduct instead of preventing it." My phone lit up with a warning from Angela. "Uncle James is calling emergency meetings with all his clients. He knows you're on to him." I gathered my team. We had one chance to expose this before James could cover his tracks. Time to show him what real regulatory power looks like. Within hours, we launched simultaneous audits of every company connected to James's firm. The evidence was overwhelming, and this time, there would be no easy escape. "Your days of playing both sides are over," I told him when we finally met. "You taught me how to spot corruption. Remember?" James's carefully crafted facade finally cracked. "You've become everything we used to fight against." "No," I corrected. "I've become what you never could. Someone who uses power to create positive change." As the investigation closed in, James faced a choice: cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger consequences than before. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned twice. To create positive change. As the investigation closed in, James faced a choice: cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger consequences than before. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned twice. To create positive change. As the investigation closed in, James faced a choice: cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger consequences than before. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned twice. To create positive change. As the investigation closed in, James faced a choice: cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger consequences than before. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned twice. To create positive change. As the investigation cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger consequences than before. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned twice. To create positive change. As the investigation cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger consequences than before. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned twice. To create positive change. As the investigation cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger consequences than before. Some lessons, it seemed, had to be learned twice. To create positive change. As the investigation cooperate and help dismantle the corruption he'd built, or face even stronger with James's consulting firm exposed and shut down, I focused on building something lasting. Our new regulatory framework was transforming corporate America, making ethical business practices the standard rather than the exception. Companies are actually competing to show who has better ethics programs, Claire reported during our weekly briefing. "Remember when James said that would never happen?" My phone buzzed with messages from business schools wanting to study our methods. The next generation of corporate leaders would start their careers understanding that integrity wasn't just right. It was essential for success. Victoria brought news from our training division. Even James's old clients are joining our certification program. They finally understand that real ethics isn't about looking good, it's about being good. "You know what the real victory is?" I asked my team as we reviewed our progress. "Not stopping corruption, but making it obsolete." James's final message arrived as we prepared to launch our Global Standards Initiative. "You've won. But remember, power always finds a way." "No," I replied. "Leadership finds a way." Power just follows. Looking out at the city skyline from my office, I thought about how far we'd come from that birthday party where everything changed. James had tried to destroy me, but instead, he'd forced me to become something stronger, a leader who transformed not just one company, but an entire industry. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's using that success to make sure no one else faces the same betrayal. He'd forced me to become something stronger, a leader who transformed not just one company, but an entire industry. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's using that success to make sure no one else faces the same betrayal. He'd forced me to become something stronger, a leader who transformed not just one company, but an entire industry. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's using that success to make sure no one else faces the same betrayal. He'd forced me to become something stronger, a leader who transformed not just one company, but an entire industry. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's using that success to make sure no one else faces the same betrayal. 18 months into my role as commissioner, a new threat emerged. A coalition of old guard executives, including some of William's former allies, launched a campaign to weaken our ethics regulations. They're claiming our standards are hurting American competitiveness, Claire reported, getting support from some members of Congress. James's fingerprints are all over this, Victoria noted, reviewing the proposal. Same arguments, same tactics, just better hidden. My phone buzzed with news that several key senators were backing the initiative. The old network was still powerful, still fighting against change. I called an emergency press conference. These regulations aren't hurting business, I declared. They're hurting corruption, and that's exactly what they're designed to do. Later, meeting with congressional leaders, I presented hard data showing how ethical companies consistently outperform their competitors. You want American business to be competitive? I challenged them. Then let's compete on integrity, not corruption. The vote to weaken the regulations failed. Another of James's shadow moves thwarted. Some people never learn, Claire observed as we watched the vote count. No, I corrected. Some people never change. That's why we have to. The victory strengthened our position. More companies voluntarily adopted our highest standards, seeing the advantage of getting ahead of regulations. James's only response was a short text. You can't regulate morality. No, I replied. But we can reward integrity and punish corruption. You taught me that power responds to consequences. Looking out at the Washington skyline, I realized each challenge just made our reforms stronger. James and his allies were fighting yesterday's battles while we were building tomorrow's standards. That power responds to consequences. Looking out at the Washington skyline, I realized each challenge just made our reforms stronger. James and his allies were fighting yesterday's battles while we were building tomorrow's standards. That power responds to consequences. Looking out at the Washington skyline, I realized each challenge just made our reforms stronger. James and his allies were fighting yesterday's battles while we were building tomorrow's standards. That power responds to consequences. Looking out at the Washington skyline, I realized each challenge just made our reforms stronger. James and his allies were fighting yesterday's battles while we were building tomorrow's standards. That power responds to consequences. Looking out at the Washington skyline, I realized each challenge just made our reforms stronger. James and his allies were fighting yesterday's battles while we were building tomorrow's standards. That power responds to consequences. Looking out at the Washington skyline, I realized each challenge just made our reform. 2 years into my role as commissioner, Angela, James's niece, brought an unexpected opportunity. She'd risen to become CEO of a major tech company, and now she wanted to pilot a new kind of corporate ethics program. "It's not just about preventing corruption," she explained in my office. "It's about using technology to make ethical behavior the easiest choice." I studied her proposal. AI-driven compliance systems, real-time transparency tools, blockchain-based transaction tracking. Everything James had fought against transformed into competitive advantages. "Your uncle won't like this," I noted. "Uncle James belongs to the past," she replied firmly. "I'm building for the future." Claire brought data from initial testing. Companies using Angela's systems were seeing unprecedented levels of investor confidence and customer trust. "She's taken everything we built and evolved it," Victoria observed. "Made it stronger." My phone lit up with James's reaction. "Using my own family against me now?" "No," I texted back. "She's choosing her own path, just not the one you wanted." The program expanded rapidly. Other companies, seeing the benefits, began adopting similar systems. The next generation was taking our reforms and making them their own. "You know what really bothers him?" Angela said during a follow-up meeting. "Not that we rejected his methods, but that we made them obsolete." Looking at this younger, better version of corporate leadership, I realized we'd done more than just stop corruption. We'd changed how the next generation viewed power itself. The old networks weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed. And that was a victory even James couldn't deny. Corporate leadership, I realized we'd done more than just stop corruption. We'd changed how the next generation viewed power itself. The old networks weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed. And that was a victory even James. Corporate leadership, I realized we'd done more than just stop corruption. We'd changed how the next generation viewed power itself. The old networks weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed. And that was a victory even James. Corporate leadership, I realized we'd done more than just stop corruption. We'd changed how the next generation viewed power itself. The old networks weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed. And that was a victory even James. Corporate leadership, I realized we'd done more than just stop corruption. We'd changed how the next generation viewed power itself. The old networks weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed. And that was a victory even James. Corporate leadership, I realized we'd done more than just stop corruption. We'd changed how the next generation viewed power itself. The old networks weren't being destroyed. They were being transformed. And that was a victory even James. Corporate leadership, I realized we'd done more than just stop corruption. The Nobel Committee's announcement caught me by surprise. The prize in economic sciences, awarded for transforming corporate ethics from a regulatory burden into a driver of economic success. They specifically cited how you turned personal betrayal into systemic change, Claire said, reading the notification. From one company to an entire economic philosophy. Victoria brought headlines from around the world. Former CEO who exposed corruption wins Nobel, and ethics revolution leader honored. My phone buzzed with a message from James. "Congratulations! You've proven me wrong in ways I never imagined possible." For once, he sounded sincere. The ceremony in Stockholm was surreal. Standing at the podium, I saw faces from every phase of my journey. Claire, Victoria, Angela, even James's mother beaming proudly in the audience. Real change, I told the gathered dignitaries, doesn't come from fighting corruption. It comes from making integrity more powerful than corruption ever was. Later at the reception, Angela shared news about her ethics technology platform. Companies worldwide were adopting it, creating a new standard of transparent business. "You know what Uncle James finally understood?" she said quietly. "That you didn't just beat him. You made everything he believed in irrelevant." My phone lit up one last time. Another message from James. "You didn't just change business. You changed how power itself works. No, I replied. I just showed what was possible when you choose to use power for transformation instead of control. Looking out over the Stockholm harbor, I thought about that night at my birthday party, when James's betrayal had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far more important than revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the fight, it's in changing the game entirely. James's betrayal had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far more important than revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the fight, it's in changing the game entirely. James's betrayal had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far more important than revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the fight, it's in changing the game entirely. James's betrayal had seemed like the end of everything. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far more important than revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the fight, it's in changing the game. After the Nobel ceremony, I received an unexpected invitation. Riverside's board wanted me to return as chairwoman, overseeing the company's continued evolution while maintaining my role as commissioner. It's poetic, Claire noted. Going back to where it all started, but this time on your terms. The boardroom looked different now. Where James once plotted corruption, young executives discussed ethical innovation. Where Victoria once schemed as his secretary, she now led training sessions on corporate integrity. Some of the old guard are nervous about your return, Claire reported, especially those who still have ties to James's network. My phone buzzed with his reaction. Back to finish what you started? No, I replied. Back to build something new. The first board meeting under my leadership focused on expanding Angela's ethics technology globally. The same room where James once planned my downfall now hosted discussions about transforming business worldwide. You know what's really changed? Victoria observed during a break. Not just the policies or the people, but the entire concept of power. She was right. Looking around at these new leaders, I saw none of the secretive deals and hidden agendas that had once defined corporate culture. James thought power meant having control, I told my team later. We proved it really means having vision. The Thao company that had once been a symbol of corruption was now leading a global movement for business integrity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning, it's transforming the battlefield itself. It really means having vision. The Thao company that had once been a symbol of corruption was now leading a global movement for business integrity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning, it's transforming the battlefield itself. It really means having vision. The Thao company that had once been a symbol of corruption was now leading a global movement for business integrity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning, it's transforming the battlefield itself. It really means having vision. The Thao company that had once been a symbol of corruption was now leading a global movement for business integrity. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning, it's transforming the battlefield itself. It really means having vision. The Thao company that James requested a meeting shortly after my return to Riverside. We met in the same conference room where I'd first discovered his betrayal years ago. You've done the impossible, he admitted, looking around at the changed environment. Not just beaten the old system, but created a better one. Why are you really here, James? He placed a thick folder on the table. Because I finally understand what you've been building, and I want to help. Inside were details of remaining corruption, networks, names, dates, transactions. Everything he'd kept hidden even after his first downfall. Why now? I asked, studying the documents. Because Angela showed me something, he replied. That real power isn't about controlling systems. It's about improving them. My phone buzzed with a message from Claire. Our investigators had already verified key parts of James's information. This will take down the last of the old guard, Victoria noted, reviewing the files. I studied my ex-husband carefully. The arrogant corporate shark was gone, replaced by someone who finally seemed to understand real change. It's not about redemption, he said, reading my expression. It's about finally choosing the right side of history. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's watching them transform themselves. And real change. It's not about redemption, he said, reading my expression. It's about finally choosing the right side of history. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's watching them transform themselves. And real change. It's not about redemption, he said, reading my expression. It's about finally choosing the right side of history. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's watching them transform themselves. And real change. It's not about redemption, he said, reading my expression. It's about finally choosing the right side of history. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's watching them transform themselves. And real change. It's not about redemption, he said. 3 months after James's revelation, the corporate landscape had shifted dramatically. His information led to the exposure of deep-rooted corruption networks, but more importantly, it sparked a wave of voluntary reforms. Companies are competing to prove their ethical standards, Claire reported. They've realized integrity is the ultimate competitive advantage. Angela's technology platform had become the global standard, making transparency not just mandatory, but automatic. The old ways of hidden deals and secret accounts were becoming technically impossible. You've created something remarkable, James said during a public ethics forum where he now spoke about his own transformation. Not just regulations, but a new business culture. My phone lit up with news of another major company adopting our highest standards. The revolution we'd started was now self-sustaining. You know what really changed? Victoria asked as we watched young executives present their latest ethical innovations. Not just how business works, but why it works. She was right. The power dynamics that James had once manipulated had been transformed into forces for positive change. The next generation won't even understand how the old system worked, Claire observed. Good, I replied, thinking of that night when everything changed. That means we've truly succeeded. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in what you destroy, but in what you build to replace it. James had taught me about power, but I had learned how to transform it into something better. Looking out at the future we'd created, I realized that the best revenge wasn't just success, it was making sure that no one would ever need revenge again. About power, but I had learned how to transform it into something better. Looking out at the future we'd created, I realized that the best revenge wasn't just success, it was making sure that no one would ever need revenge again. About power, but I had learned how to transform it into something better. Looking out at the future we'd created, I realized that the best revenge wasn't just success, it was making sure that no one would ever need revenge again. About power, but I had learned how to transform it into something better. Looking out at the future we'd created, I realized that the best revenge wasn't just success, it was making sure that no one would ever need revenge again. About power, but I had learned how to transform it into something better. Looking out at the future we'd created, I realized that the best revenge wasn't just success, it was making sure that no one would ever need revenge again. About power, but I had learned